What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's another stream where I do the development. That's right. You're looking at a developing man. Developing whatever the fuck this is. The greatest RTS ever made, ever seen. And it must be seen to be believed because today we're actually moving on from the Keltar. What's up, Veek? Today we're going to be looking at the Embra Cyt and the Psychora again. And the goal is going to be to add some more high concept units. The same little flourish I did at the end of the Keltar development, I want to do to these two regencies. We'll see how far we go with them. We'll refamiliarize ourselves with them. And I guess we'll start with Embra Cyt because they're the ones that are going to be worked on first theoretically anyway. So they're the subject regency of the first tutorial, for example. So yeah, makes sense. I've already closed out all the Keltar stuff and prepared myself for the work that I'm about to do. So we'll open up the Embra Cyt folders in our Visual Studio Code shit program, and we'll take a look at what we got. So if we actually open up the Embra Cyt page as well, in this area, we can notice that we already have, we have these branches, right? We have middling conventional options for every man. It's pretty straightforward, pretty standard fare stuff there. And then you got the oddball specialized ones, and then you got the mercenary heavy hitter tech. And so I think it would be cool if we could get some consolidation as to what all of these different elements actually mean in these higher concept units. The same way, if you look at the Keltar, which I'll open up now just for the sake of demonstrating what I mean, we have the Quartermaster, which is a nice battle platform. We don't really have like a high-powered spacecraft for the Keltar. That's like one area where we're kind of lacking a little bit. But, we do have the Quartermaster. We got the Backswing, which is this like crowd control infantry unit. And obviously we have the Iron Knight, which is like the highest concept unit that we've come up with so far for the Keltar. It's very, very powerful. And generally speaking, has a lot going for it. And then, of course, there's the Mind Mountain, which gives you one range for units that are trained with that add-on. So there's a lot going on there that we were able to add, along with some of the other general purpose units that we added in the previous stream. So when we're looking at this now, the question is, like, what do these aspects actually consolidate, right? And Bloodline has the short-ranged attackers, but infantry focused, like primarily smaller Keltar, walking around, and maybe they are quite heavy and damaging, but they don't cost that hypervials really. Even this tier 4 unit's only 300 magmite only. Maybe it goes up. Whereas the Iron Knight costs a lot more magmite, but still, not that many hypervials at the grand scheme of things, and happens to have 20 armor, like a crazy unit, right? So very, very powerful. Again, the stats and costs are going to change over time, obviously, but you can kind of see where we're going with this, is that we're unlocking very heavy stat-focused units that cost a lot and maybe take a long time to build, and as a result, you're going to have less of them. And that's true of all Keltar branches. And the Iron Knight has, like, crowd control, a massive amount of it, based on, its massive high damage executing units. The Quartermaster supports a lot of the other units, allows them to maybe transcend some of their movement speed slows and stuff, or get a little bit of a better, armor set or whatever. And then you've got the Backswing, for example. There's a whole bunch of shit going on with some of this, where you get crowd control, but it's specialized in a very specific way, where it has to be a frontal arc, and then he also gets a bonus of attack speed for every unit that he hits with his frontal arc. And so he's ramping up his damage per second, he's ramping up his attack speed, and that will also lead into the shield mechanic that the Keltar have. So we're able to consolidate some of the core principles of what Keltar units actually are in some of these higher concept units. Like I said, the Warwing branch probably still needs like a heavy hitting spaceship of some kind that's like really powerful, but that's kind of a basic concept. We don't necessarily need some high concept thing. Whereas for the Embra Cyt, and to a lesser extent for the Psychora, we don't really have that many high concept units. We don't really have that many like exemplars, pillars of whatever these units are really meant to do. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would mention about these that's lacking, along with just more general understanding of what's going on with these regencies. What's up, Walker? Move the chat into an area that's a little bit more easy for me to look at while I'm doing these streams. Place buffs on units that don't expire with time and aren't permanent either. Buffs expire after X amount of shots or X amount of hits taken, so you can take your time to outfit a strike force. Oh, okay, I see. That could be an interesting idea. I do feel like it has the potential for it to feel a little bit too micromanagey, where you have to, well, you have to literally outfit your units, right? And if you automate it too much, it obviously becomes less interesting. But I think there's probably some way I could work that idea into a Regency. I don't actually know who it would be. What's up, Alexander? Welcome. Yeah, we do have the chat relay on, so the stuff is being sent into the Stream Cross station on the Discord server, as well as obviously between the YouTube and Twitch chats. Figured I would just keep that going since that's something that Veek put together or used for his stream. So it could be AoE. Yeah, it would definitely have to be AoE, I think. But and that would solve some of the problems. But then you have to also consider, like, because it's AoE, like, is the radius really small? Like, how does it work? You could make it trigger on, like, taking damage or killing or something in terms of actually releasing the buff, but then it feels less deliberate. You have to actually do something. I mean, it can still feel deliberate, but it doesn't feel like preparing for ahead of time, which is, like, I think the core mechanic, the core thematic of that idea. So I would definitely want to take a look at implementing it for. I don't actually know which Regency would benefit from that the most, if I have to think about it now. Maybe the Rune. The Rune have the mechanic. Well, it's not really a mechanic, but the Rune have their own. Let's see. The metal workers that implant weaponry and equipment inside their own soldiers, because the Rune are able to reshape their whole musculature, like all of their. Basically, they can remove all of their individual body parts and, like, change everything. They can change their whole physiology. So you can, like, I have talked about this, I don't think on stream, but I talked about the idea of Rune units. A lot of them are probably going to be turret units internally, which would allow them to, like, attack while moving, I guess, for the most part. Or not attack while moving. Attack independent, like, they can turn, the top part of them can turn to attack, even if the bottom part is, like, facing the other way. And the reason for this is kind of, I guess it's kind of obvious when you think about it, but it's because they're able to reshape a lot of their body, so they should be able to be a bit more flexible naturally. The other thing is that they could, like, I was thinking that they could, there could be one of them that is a melee unit that, like, a melee unit, but it slaps people from range because it literally takes, like, one of its legs and one of it and its other arm, and it feeds that into its main arm, which is holding some sort of weapon of some sort, maybe a lance, and, like, stabs people from a range or something. That could be kind of interesting, I think. You'd obviously have some Rune that would, like, projectile out, like, certain things from within their bodies. You could imagine, like, some sort of grenade factory that was stuck inside their body that they were, like, projectiling out or something. That could be kind of interesting. So yeah, maybe the outfitters could be used for them. That could be one of the options. Just in the sense that they have these metal workers that, like, do these implants on the battlefield. I don't think we can use it for literally everything, Veek. The problem with it is that the number of interactions, like attacks or whatever, is much harder to keep track of, actually, than the number of seconds. If you're familiar with how many seconds something lasts, that means the same thing no matter which unit you're using. And the only thing that differs is, like, oh, if this is an attack, like an armor penetration buff, then this unit that attacks faster than another unit will be able to make use of it for more attacks. So I don't think it can be, like, a catch-all replacement for everything. And just based on the fact that, like, different units are going to use it to different amounts. So you can't use X-Tiles Walked either, because then units that move slower will be able to hold it for longer, obviously. That would be one example. Yeah, Chalks, I actually wrote down some ideas for overlays in general, although I don't know if I covered that specific thing. But all buffs and debuffs have visual reads. Overlays attached to units at specific offsets, called attachment points. Weapon enhancing buffs will attach to unit's weapon. Armor hampering debuff will attach to unit's body or heavy armor, if applicable. And then overlays that are more attention grabbing than others are presumed to be more impactful, with less important effects having more subdued overlays. So this would be something that would... the specific example I always try to give for this, because I think it consolidates it pretty well, is contrasting something like, I would say Defensive Matrix is, like, a very positive buff that also means a lot because it's, like, bonus shields, right? And armor reduction or damage reduction or whatever. Well, I guess it's just bonus shields. So that would have, like, a very obvious effect because, oh, this unit's got that. Or if you think of, like, Cosmonarchy Brood War, you would think of something like the Ultra Core's Kaiser Rampage, where it kills a unit and it gets a speed boost and attack speed boost for like 1 second. It's very small, but it's very impactful when it happens in those short bursts. And what I wanted to do from the get-go was highlight the weapons. Like, well, in a perfect world, I'd actually make the blades of the Ultra Cord like drip in blood or something to demonstrate that they just got a kill. But I wanted to highlight and change the color of the weapons or make them pulse almost as a way to do that, as a way to show that. And it would be kind of trivial to do that in Antikythera. I could just mask out all the bone pixels and create that as a separate mask and say like this is what you'll remap in the graphic with the red pulse or overlay onto the graphic with the red pulse or something. But that would be a way to demonstrate like, oh, this is like a very flashy, in your face, frequently pulsing effect. And that must mean it's like very high, like very powerful in that sense. And then you would contrast that to the Lazarus Agent behavior that the Apostles have, which revives units on death. That only happens on death. It doesn't affect their combat prowess in the moment. So you don't actually need to know that all the time. And so there would be an infrequent, maybe once every 2 seconds or 3 seconds reminder in the form of like a pulsing green trail that would like appear very infrequently. And so you kind of get like a sense for how often these overlays would show up. Yeah, the expiring graphics would need to be obvious somehow. You can kind of take the cheap way out by just like making them flash off or something, or like blink basically. But I feel like that would be too distracting most of the time, particularly when you consider like the reason why we had overlaid attachment points. The reason why I came up with that is because I was imagining like 30 overlays on one unit potentially in like the cases where you have really powerful tanky units and you've got like a bunch of buffs and debuffs. And I wanted I don't think it's possible to completely salvage readability in such a case, but I wanted to give it my best shot so that you would only basically have edge cases that would be massive pain points instead of it being every single time there's more than like 2 behaviors. Like if you think of any time there's more than 2 or 3 overlays in a Brood War match or a Cosmonic Brood War match on a single unit, it's like really hard to tell what the fuck's going on. It doesn't help that Blizzard literally reused like Acid Spores for the Devourer, Plague for the Defiler, and Ensnare for the Queen. They're all the same graphic, just with a different color, but whatever. The long StarCraft video is coming along. I'm working on it every day. It's just going to take a while. I finished the first 7 paragraphs of the second campaign editing. Besides one clip I need to actually go into StarCraft and make. If you mean stack fall off, I don't think it should be universal, but most of the stacks and like stack fall offs in the early game, where it's like if it's not refreshed within X seconds, it will fall off or it will expire. That stuff will be consistent just by virtue of like reducing overhead, and so you'll get this natural breakpoint of like more important, powerful, expensive, higher tier effects will last longer between repeats, basically. But for the most part, it's 2 seconds. We have a pretty good universal rule of 2 seconds for a lot of things, actually. That's the time for cloaking to return to a unit that's permanently cloaked after they attack. That's the time for the tracking to finish. So if a unit escapes vision, you'll track it through the Fog of War for 2 seconds, unless it regains vision. You regain vision of it. Then it'll obviously refresh. So 2 seconds is something that I'm keeping for a lot of behavior stack fall-off stuff. And we'll have like maybe larger ones when you get to a certain tier of ability. It is not 3. But even as much as it would pain me to include 3 so prominently, Veek, I would do it if I thought it was actually the best for gameplay. I just don't think it is. So I think 2 is a really nice sweet spot in that respect. Thankfully. More like film grain. Okay. Getting back to what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, I think the rune units would probably be the ones to benefit from the outfitter thing. I'll throw that in the planetods. I'll throw that in the ideas here. probably be it. Okay, I threw that in there. I guess I'll add this stuff to the dictionary. I had already done that, but because we moved the location of the vault, I had to remake the vault in Obsidian, and it undid all of the fucking additions to the dictionary because the dictionaries are not global; they're based on which vault you have open. Which is, I don't fucking get that one at all. But okay, so yeah, we were in the middle of trying to figure out what the sort of defining high concept traits would be in the context of the Embra Cyt and the branches. Everyman is kind of defined by not being very high concept, so it'll be kind of interesting to imagine what those would be. I suppose those would just be kind of like those would be more like defining characteristics of the Embra Cyt themselves. Energy decrease is not universal because some ability casts do not require energy. And also, yes, it's boring. I would actually say most behaviors will not require energy. And a lot of things that aren't even spellcasts require energy, like the manual reload thing where you spend energy based on projectiles shot or attacks, I guess. So I think oddball can be defined as like stuff you wouldn't normally associate with a more conventional army, stuff that really does stick out quite deliberately. Mercenary is the heavy hitters. So everyman, instead of being like, again, the whole idea behind the Embra Cyt, they're underestimated, but that's for a reason. They're considered lesser races. That's for a reason. They don't have the technology to hit head to head, right? Their conception. So, people think of the like. If you think back to all the topics that I've talked about when designing the Keltar in the last like 4 or 5 plus streams or whatever it's been, one of the main things that I keep coming back to is that the Keltar have units that at tier 1 equate to like tier 2 or 3 for other regencies. Well, if anything, that would probably be the inverse of the Everyman branch. That doesn't mean that you're spamming them necessarily. I actually think that you would probably be able to spam them from a resource standpoint, but not necessarily from a time standpoint, which would give a nice little indication. They would have training time parity between other regencies, but they would be generally cheaper. I think that would be what sets them apart in that respect. And they would probably just rely on specialists, which come from the infrastructure branch, actually, which we haven't even talked about yet regarding the Embra Cyt, where the infrastructure actually trains stuff like the old bones or the perch pistol, where you actually have some element of utility, and you are expected to build stuff like additional strong boxes and whatnot. So the best and the priciest. I left myself a quite clear hint about what those would be. I'll replace that later. So yeah, the core idea that I'm getting at here is that the Everyman branch will not really be good at dealing frontal blows going toe-to-toe with other regencies, but they will be very good at harassment, about specialization, maybe a bit of utility, stuff like that, right? So, we have the Kaiteron, where he's got what we're calling an 8 gun, and it's got 1 damage per shell, but fires 8 attacks. People have commented that it seems weird that there's more armor penetration than damage per attack. That's because there will be flat damage increasing behaviors in the game. So figured I would just mention that since I'm on this unit's page. But he's got the hijack behavior, and specifically it's team hijack, where multiple units can hijack the same target to speed up the process. Now, I didn't fully conceptualize this behavior. I don't know exactly everything there is to know about it. Where like there's probably going to be some edge cases, like what happens when the unit is finished with the hijack? Do they enter the target? Like, is the unit consumed? Is one of the units consumed to enter the target? Because right now it just acts like mind control according to the description, but that obviously doesn't make sense if you're hijacking, right? But the idea behind this unit is that, like, my thinking was, hijack allows you to sacrifice this unit that's at tier 1, doesn't cost a whole lot of resources. It's a reasonable cost for tier 1 unit, maybe a little bit on the pricier side. But specifically, if you can get it close enough to some high value target, you can hijack that target. And like trade a tier 1 unit, hypothetically speaking, for a tier 10 unit. Very unlikely, because obviously the unit is vulnerable during the time it's hijacking. So I guess we could like specifically explain a little bit more about this behavior now that I think about it. We think about highway. No, that's not highway. I guess hijack is just a behavior thing, yeah. So we would say during this process, the hijacker is vulnerable to being attacked. If successful, a hijacker is consumed. We'll just say enters the target. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So the main trouble is that we're talking about like weight capacity to hold them, and that just means that you would theoretically be able to hijack an infantry unit if they happen to. Oh no, I guess weight capacity is a very specific stat, so that's not true. But this basically only works on transports, right? You know that is a pretty big deal in terms of how limited it is, because I don't have like an explicit vehicle class or aircraft class or anything. So this is only for transports, also for structures. So there is that. But right now, I feel like maybe it is a little bit it's highly niche. Maybe that's fine. We'll see how it works. I'm not gonna bother. I'm not gonna bother detailing how I will determine what the which hijacker to pick if it's a team hijack. It'll be the one that the surviving hijacker that was in like the first in line, basically. So if you hijack with 3 units and the first one dies, the second one to hit the hijack will be the one that enters. So it'll always be first come, first serve, basically. I guess I could add that. Okay. So yeah, we'll figure out more information about that later on, but at least it's very verbose right now, but at the very least we get some information. Yeah, adding multi-attack like the Siren was pretty cool. So yeah, anyway, we're kind of getting at the idea that there are some frontal units within Everyman, but for the most part they exist as like you know, basic options. Like they're defined a lot by the speed that they operate at. They're defined a lot by the dude, the Otini or the sidecast moves so fucking slow. I remember thinking about that, and like I probably do need to increase that. I guess I didn't save this. I probably do need to increase the Otini speed, but that is pretty funny. Go to the sidecast. It's at 2, at least 2 speed, and I'll give it more health. Or I guess I can give it more. Yeah, I don't know. Give it more health is probably fine. But yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's pretty funny. The idea is that they move very slowly. They're slow pieces of shit. TBH. So yeah, And there's the Ertalin Key, which obviously has very short cooldown. But the idea behind this unit that can attack while moving is that the gun that it has fires in like a suppressive fire or whatever. So it deals area damage. So you can imagine that that's quite useful. You'd have to ask Veek. I don't think the demo was updated recently. We fixed an issue that was pervading the stream yesterday. Well, Veek fixed the issue. He tracked it down regarding cliffs. So he's going to, at some point, he's going to work on updating the cliff handling, and then maybe at that point we'll, the tile handling specifically, maybe at that point we'll release an update again. Yeah, they aren't in the demo. The siren works in so any specialist, which means a unit that has energy, within 6 range of the siren is linked to the siren, the caster, when they cast this behavior, this ability. And they get more energy regeneration rate per link. And then for every specialist that they have linked, they can attack another target. So they basically, when they fire their weapon, they can grab another target in the weapon range. So you can imagine that this unit can walk around and just, you know, if it's linked to enough targets, considering it itself is a specialist, the links have to be unique, so you can't like relink over and over again to the same unit to add the stack. But if you have like an army of 10 sirens and they're all linked to each other, then you have an army of units that can attack 10 unique targets. So they just absolutely mow down something like a Zethrakor army or even like Mavericks probably. I mean, they'd probably lose to... They don't have the best stats, I'll put it to you that way. But... And then obviously the energy regeneration rate thing, I probably don't need to do that. That could probably be removed actually, because that was added before the whole like being within 5 range of a unit that an enemy that's dying gives you energy thing. So that absolutely doesn't need to be there anymore. Now that I think about it, we can probably just remove that in the next update. If you're thinking about within Cosmonarchy retail, will there be a global passive energy regen? I think so, yeah. I haven't decided on that, but I honestly haven't even thought about it. That's definitely a case where I've taken it as a bit of a, shall we say, for granted. I guess there should probably be a vitals section, and that's where I would talk about that. I might change the title later, so I'll leave that there. I guess we don't really need to put that there. I mean, it would be nice to hear an actual argument against it, but I suppose maybe you haven't fully thought about that. My thinking behind passive energy regen is um, that's sort of the same thinking that goes into passive shield regeneration for something like the Psychora, or obviously the corollary could be like Protoss in Brood War, or HP regeneration with Zerg. Now, I did have some ideas for how to change those things to make them more interesting. Obviously, Protoss shields. I made Protoss shields and Zerg regeneration. Conceptually, I came up with the idea, and then Veek implemented it, where they wouldn't actually regenerate unless they were out of combat for 2 seconds. That 2-second timer is still there for Psychoran shields, but we don't have any units that have HP regeneration. Basically, put in the situation. Yeah, that argument doesn't really hold up though, because you get a ton of free resources if you want to interpret them that way for no cost in an RTS, because you're managing entire armies. So I don't really think it's the same. You can't really compare the two things there. I don't even really think that ammo should be a thing in FPS games personally, but like I actually find ammo itself to be quite stupid. But that's because I'm imagining things in a very sci-fi environment where conceptually it doesn't make sense. And then I also see the impact of it in game. I think clip sizes should be a thing. Don't get me wrong. I think it makes sense to run out and have to reload, but it doesn't really make sense to completely run out. Like you introduce a problem by accepting the basic idea of ammo. You introduce a problem where you then have to solve it by always providing ammo pickups and stuff, or forcing players. Like it's a cheap way to force players to like switch weapons or whatever. Well, if you want to talk about rewarding being passive, Vic, you have to remember that literally every time you sit there doing nothing, the opponent is always given an opportunity then to punish you by doing something. So I don't think that argument holds water either. Technically, shields needing to regenerate over time promotes passive play after a skirmish, but do you want to be passive or do you want to win the game? I don't think you can be passive in the games that we're making and still eke out a win. Unless your opponent also made a lot more mistakes than you. I think being passive will be the single biggest death knell of any player, actually. That'll be like the biggest mistake they ever make in one of these games. And we do already have the more proactive approach of energy when the specialist is on the front lines by positioning them aggressively. It's not necessarily the greatest thing insofar as some specialists actually are fighters. So, I don't know. I think reloading also has some drawbacks where it's like a very lengthy animation, but I do like the idea behind, like, oh, I've emptied this clip, so I should switch to another weapon, basically. But that also is kind of like a hollow, just like, I'll force you to use this other thing. Realistically speaking, the player should opt into switching to a different gun because it's more useful in a specific situation. That would be how you would design an arsenal of FPS guns that don't have bizarre things there just to limit how effective they are in certain situations. Like if you design a monster retinue and a roster of weapons that can coexist with one another instead of one always being more dominant and more obviously like far and away the better choice, then you get a way better outcome, I think. I'm not currently planning too many, if any, units that are only defined by their ability to cast spells. I don't know if I have any unit that's like that in the plans so far. I don't think so. Like, obviously, that was the case for something like the Cantavis or High Templar in Brood War, and some other units like the Matroleth. You could probably fix the Matrolith just by giving it detection or something, or transport, if you really wanted to. Go for some low hanging fruit. But I don't think there's anything that's just a spellcaster. However, I do kind of like the idea of making it so that, I guess you can just reward units even more for being in a situation where they are on the front lines. If they're, instead of having passive energy regeneration, you have instead of passive energy regeneration, and also instead of 5 energy per slain enemy nearby, it's like 10 energy per slain enemy nearby. Maybe I can see an argument for that. No, Vic, we weren't talking about buffing the Matrix. We were talking about making it defined by something other than just spells. Well, you can have guns themselves be a resource on the map to secure, I think. And then when you die, you drop your guns. That would be how you would do that. Something similar to that without it being hollow. It's not really anything to ever secure in single player content because obviously enemies are always incompetent. Rates of ammo expenditure sound kind of like, I could imagine a situation where you get a power up or something that gives you 2-shot, but you drain your ammo way faster or something. Basically, an attack speed boost for an FPS. Yeah, and health is something that you only lose if you're bad. If you want to go that route, you could just say health is something you lose. The enemy earns, depriving you of. I mean, technically, ammo expenditure is something you are opting into by shooting, but it's not really possible to not shoot. So, yeah, I think so. I think out of the realm, your complaint about passive energy regen being boring is heard. But I think you might be coming at it with the assumption that there are going to be units that only cast spells, and I don't know if that will ever be the case. Even the Seraph, aka Science Vessel, isn't really the case because it also has detection. In Cosmonic Brood War, it has the passive observance. So I think every unit that casts an ability actively that requires energy will also. Do I even have an energy unit that? The only thing that I think I've actually planned for casting an ability and draining energy from the ability is actually the Waylay and its successor, the Herald, where they have the leaping behavior or ability. But they get money. They get energy for running, for moving around. So Yeah, energy regenerate passively would just be the same as HP or shield regen in Cosmonic Brood War. I think it was slightly less, but I patched it recently to uh, in Cosmonic Brood War to be in line with all the other regions. Although I don't think I could make it exactly in line because of stupid integer math. It is less than 1 per second in Brood War normally. It's like slightly. It's like 0.7 or something. Yeah. I mean, personally, I think that the idea of gaining energy by being on the front lines of combat is pretty valuable. But if you do that and you have no other way of also gaining energy, so the problem here is that, like, for one, regeneration rates actually won't be consistent per regency, not just potentially energy. I'm talking about like shields. Like the Psychoran energy regeneration or shield regeneration rate will be different than like if Githrovins have shields or some other regency has shields. Because these extended life bars, might be provided by something that doesn't regenerate at all. It might be like Defensive Matrix, for example, where there's no shield regeneration on that. It's just extra life. Stuff like that. So there's going to be some cases where the shields or over like the upper layers of health bars are do not regenerate, right? So I think you would probably do something like the other problem with making it so that any unit with energy gains energy when they're in a area. I think like I wouldn't want it to be a weird thing where only some units have that passive. But basically that would mean it so that like if you're using the there was a manual reload enemy somewhere. Is it this? I was pretty sure there was a manual reload enemy for the Keltar. Maybe it was not the Keltar. Fuck, what was it? No, Chalks is talking about that too. Like, I think people just have a whack idea that they need to make stuff more complicated than it actually is. Oh, here it is. The Shatter Step. That's what had it. I knew it was a Keltar unit. Rise Fall of Rome. Yeah, I think Rise Fall of Rome was Rise Son of Rome was definitely a fucking dumb game. I'll probably be playing Shadow of Mordor's sequel later. We'll see how the day goes. Yeah, so a unit with manual reload that kills a target would get, if they were within 5 range of the target, they would get 5 energy back, which would basically be 5 attacks. Or in this case, 2.5 attacks, because this unit fires 2 shots, 2 projectiles. Like, I don't know how to feel about that, because there's probably a ton of units that would get that, right? So maybe we could make it so the manual reload drains 2 energy instead of 1, or maybe we would just reduce. I guess what we would do is we would just reduce the cap of energy. But I don't know. That is weird. Yeah, this system would probably fall apart under the scrutiny of such an addition if we were to do that. If we were to remove passive energy regen, which is fine for those units. I don't think those units would have passive energy regen anyway. But we were to add that behavior where you get the energy for being near kills. I don't want to make it so that you get energy for kills, because most units, especially units with manual reload, are going to have low DPS, like low individual damage rather. High DPS, but low individual damage. The likelihood of them being the one who lands the last hit is really minimal and effectively random. Might as well be something that's like outside of the player's control. Also limits it to only one beneficiary, so I guess what we could do is we could keep it at 5 per hit per kill or something. A resource spent on... It would, I mean, you could do like a shield battery. It's always funny to me that you use this map as the background. Oh shit, I've got an account because this is Wikidot. It logged me in. What is this? What's my level? It doesn't tell me. Yeah, I think you could do something like the shield battery, but for energy, or you could do like a charge system where it just tops the unit off completely for resources. The shield battery itself didn't cost resources; it costed energy, which is pretty recursive in this case. So we would probably want to make it a resource-based thing. That would mean that you could basically you could probably build a lot of those for like cheap walls or something because they probably wouldn't cost that much money to build the batteries themselves. But then the real cost is like when you actually use them, obviously. So. Yeah, I think the big argument against charges is obviously that you can't replenish them without, in this case, going all the way back home or having some outpost in the front. Yeah. It's just Warcraft 3 is a fucking disaster, isn't it? So many stats, so little damage. I feel like it probably works a lot better at smaller scales. For the scale that we're going for, you would probably have like you would actually want to station a large number of units in, well, maybe not a large number of units, but you would basically want defensive stations in various places. And wide swaths of buildable terrain would be a pretty important resource in the mid to late game. So that's a big deal too. Listen, man, when Antikythera is taken care of for our needs, it will also be epic for your needs as well. So there'll be plenty of room. Ah, yeah, no problem, homie. He's got some pretty good videos. I haven't watched his Half-Life series, which I guess is what he might be most known for. And I also don't tend to watch his game dungeon stuff, I guess. Unless it's a game that actually I think is interesting. Like his Sonic one was pretty funny. I liked that one. But he comes at games from a very weird angle. I mean, he'd be interesting to talk to and stuff, but about that stuff from a purely psychological point of view. He always has kind of like interesting answers to questions. Well, maybe not always. That might be overselling it, but he often has interesting answers to questions when he's doing his like video chat with fans thing. Which ironically enough, he tells everybody, he's like, "Don't watch this. Watch something else on my channel." I'm like, "Nah, dude. I don't really vibe with the same stuff that he vibes with." Like he talks about how Deus Ex is like the best game or most important game or something because it has some dialogue lines that well, I think that's actually it. I think that's why. There's some specific dialogue interaction. And I was like, I don't know about that one, dude. But you know, to each their own, I guess. Punch him. Cool guy though. Cool guy. Big fan. I was surprised that he's willing to talk with people who have like really low view counts and stuff. He would probably be interested in coming on something like the Big Boys table back when we were still doing that more often. Which is pretty funny because like he's basically just like, "Yeah, do you have at least 100 views? Okay, I'll come on." I'm just like, "What the fuck?" I haven't actually seen any of his appearances on other people's content. So I don't know if he gets that if he gets requested very often, but that's very funny to me. Cuz that's not a very large number of views, obviously. I'm not sure if any Regency would regenerate life. You could say that Orlithray are the natural ones because they're Zerg, but they're not really Zerg. I guess Rune might. That would make sense for them. Okay. I don't think I missed anything here, but I can always return to it later. It is pretty funny that our engine makes our website, by the way. In case you weren't sure what was going on around here, our engine compiles our website, also known as. Obviously, this looks very small compared to some of the other stuff. I guess we could compartmentalize these. Or consolidate these, rather. Okay. Well, we've managed to gab a lot and talk a lot of shit. But when I come back from this short break to use the bathroom and get more water, I will actually do some unit ideas. So, BRB. Yo, yo, yo. All right. Now that we've talked our shit, let's hit the X button on that. So I'm thinking Embra Cyt harassment units. Some interesting harassment unit concepts. So we've already touched on the Ertalan key with the advancing motion. So that's firewall moving. We also have the perch pistol, of course, which allows you to attach to any target. Just kind of sourced from infrastructure, obviously. So both of those are kind of harassment oriented. Well, no, the old bones is utility. Perch pistols like utility combat disruption. Really, is what it is. The Ertalan key is like crowd control, but I mean, it's not the most like. It's fairly pricey while also not being particularly well defended, vital wise. So I'm thinking we already have a number of fast moving units, or Talon Key in particular, but the Rascal, the Goon, and the Kaiteran are all pretty reasonable. Oh, the other thing we can obviously do is start looking for maybe some sequels, some successors. And of course, the open question with regards to the Embra Cyt is: will the successor be in the same? Will the successor be in the same source regency? Right. Yeah. So meeting a specific condition would allow them to regenerate very quickly. I suppose you could even go a level deeper than that and say that as they regenerate, casting an ability or expending energy will interrupt the regeneration process. I guess it would be a casting an active ability, so that like if you have some cloak or something, it doesn't fuck with it because it's like passive drain. So the energy regeneration, right, would. So you could allow it to refill you up all the way, or for however long the passive boost worked, and that would allow you to, like, if you interrupt it, it's because you absolutely wanted it, like absolutely needed to cast right then and there for survival. Could be interesting. I just don't know what the condition would actually be is the tough part. I feel like the condition probably couldn't be consistent unless other traits of those specialists would be consistent as well. Well, I do have ideas for things that were previously gated behind abilities, either conditional passive behaviors or stuff like the what would you call it? Stuff like active abilities, I guess, more conventional stuff. Had to deal with a siren. And not the siren that I added in my mod. That would be spooky. Yeah, the trouble with the movement speed thing is that I actually feel like it was a bit too lame in that you were actually getting a lot of benefits for getting the unit upgraded, more transport space, more vision, more health, but you weren't like I don't think you needed it to be a net increase in transport speed or movement speed or transport space. I think you could have like specialized little morphs along the way. But I do see what you're meaning. Like I had plans to basically make it so that certain behaviors or abilities would be worked into the basic. So the conversion would basically look like ability into behavior that needs some element of managing into pure behavior that applies on every attack or something. You could imagine how that would be useful in a few different manners, I suppose. And there could be more stops along the way as well, but those are just the things that I immediately thought of. But I had the vague allusion towards such a reality where you have that sort of approach a while ago. I was thinking about how, especially with the successor system, where you have like tier 3 or 4 units that are downstream of tier 1 or 2 units, you can kind of see how it would take shape. Um, I don't know. Yeah, if it were some sort of status effect, it would absolutely need to be consistent regardless of the ability. But in the case where it's like a new unit and it just has a play on the old unit concept, I think it actually makes a bit more sense, right? Actually, forget what the passive is called. Right now, I'm putting together a successor to the Auteur, which is it's an oddball unit. It has an AoE damaging beam. This unit will instead have a cannon that pierces through targets, so you'll still get a similar sort of AoE effect. And I want some sort of thing to happen if it pierces through. Basically, if any targets are pierced, I wanted an additional status effect to be applied to the pierced targets specifically. This is probably something where you'll get a little bit of echoes of the Claymore from Cosmonic Brood War, where it has any target that's pierced takes less damage, but has their movement speed slowed. I think you'll probably take full damage if you're pierced, since the piercing is consistent with other units. It's a common behavior. But there will be some other status effect, and I haven't really decided exactly what I want yet. I was thinking of either blinding the target or maybe giving the attacker a benefit instead of debuffing the target. The attacker could be like instantly cloak if it pierces, so allowing it to reposition. I kind of like that idea. So I think that's probably what I'll do. So in this case, it stops when it finds a target that has higher armor than armor penetration. That way you can scale it with. So it doesn't actually take any subsequent damage from like if it. In this case, we've got a 3 armor pen, right? Because 3. If you fall through like 10 units that all have 1 armor, it'll still pierce. So that might seem a bit less intuitive, but That sort of more binary reaction is actually what I'm going for, because I feel like in the long term it'll lead to more consistency in terms of what expectations you have. Where you know that you're fighting a specific unit that has a certain amount of armor pen but has this passive, you can check the armor pen by looking at the unit's stats, and then you can say, okay, which units do I have that have 3 or more armor pen or 3 or more armor? That would then allow you to position accordingly with your army. But yeah, I really like the way that that kind of interaction shapes up, or is seeming to shape up, I should say. So the other thing is that the production facilities that you get as with access to the Embra Cyt provide you with some pretty interesting costs, we could say, where they require a certain amount of um, yeah, well, it's mostly like enabled by um, or whatever it is. I don't know if this already is. Unfortunately, that made me completely lose my fucking lose my train of thought. So I have no idea what I was just talking about. Oh shit. This isn't what I wanted. There we go. All right, now that I got my music back, what was I looking at? Oh yeah, so basically the embassies give you these representatives, and the structures, like the additional production facilities, require representatives instead of it being like a, well, something else. I don't even know what you would call it. So basically, if you want, access to um, if you want access to something like tier 3 infantry production, you would do something like, you would get a certain amount of um, representatives, and then that would be how you would actually attain the access to build them. And so the units themselves don't require representatives, but if you don't have the facilities, you can't train the units. That's basically the idea we got going on here. There you go. Little reference for you fraud strikers out there. That would be called capitalist, obviously. Oh wait, used by doesn't exist anymore either. Shit. You'd probably like the perch pistol, Chocks. Embra Cyt unit. Currently a spider mine icon. It attaches to units that might have a free turret slot and slows units that it attacks. And if it's attached to a unit, the unit's attacks, the attaché, benefits from the slow on hit as well. So, pretty cool, I would say. Pretty epic. So you'll get sort of like oddball type attachment traps like that for Embra Cyt a lot. They're very scrappy in that respect. Sometimes that will probably be the most commonplace thing, but the other idea that I had was that turret slots would be available for units if they had a certain amount of weight. So it was something like you had to have at least, I think it was like you had to have at least 3 weight. So weight 3 and 4 would be basically it would be your weight divided by 2 rounded down. I think oh no, I guess it would be rounded by yeah, divided by 2 rounded down. So by that definition, I suppose 2 would also have a turret slot. But the idea is that if you have 3 weight or 4 weight, you have 1 turret slot. And 5 and 6 is 2 turret slots, and so on. So that's basically what you would be looking at. Units wouldn't necessarily spawn without turrets. But the formula for weight would scale with it. I suppose you could probably have some sort of specialized facility or something that, like, while you're training a unit, you can choose what you... So we have this idea for the control scheme. This is something I cover in the Cosmonarchy Monarchy documentation as opposed to the Xibalba documentation. This is specific to the RTS view. So we have, like, structures can be selected. There's something here about structures. Oh no, I think it was orders. Maybe it's in orders or something. No, I don't know actually. There was something where I documented the selecting units or selecting yeah. Well, AoE definitely can work, but if the unit is large enough, like it will be in a lot of cases, the turrets will be all disparate. So you'll need really wide AoE or a lot of like individual AoEs. But yeah, I think you'll probably be able to, like, whatever the most recently like placed turret is there, you'll probably be able to heal, like repair what it was, or replace it with a new turret if you have one floating around. Or you build one on the thing or something. Yeah, it doesn't look like I mentioned structures that are being... I guess I didn't note it. So in Armies of Exego, there was or Exigo, or however you're supposed to pronounce it. I think it's Exigo. Maybe I did put it here. Is it under construction? That would be really funny. No, it's not. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I just never documented it. It feels really weird because I remember describing it quite a bit. Um, yeah, okay. I've seen plenty of stuff that's kind of like this. So what, is he like redeploy the turrets later, or is he just going to keep shooting him? Aha. They do reappear. Yeah, stuff like that could definitely work. Obviously, in our cases, we would what did I just do? Ah, shit. Owned. What a dummy. Yeah, I think that stuff would be pretty cool, actually. In our case, we would go through the motions of requiring players to interact with the turrets somehow to replenish them, and it wouldn't just like reappear. But I guess in some cases, maybe it would have some sort of passive regeneration, like in really high tiers or whatever. But I'm not sure. I guess maybe if they were like immobile, if they were stationary, it might happen. But I could think about that. I think it's kind of interesting. There's a ton of different games that are of completely different genres that will still provide inspiration for different things in Cosmonarchy retail. Oh, it's kind of funny that the perch pistol is enabled by that. Yeah, I mean, well, I can even imagine stuff like, FPS games and RPGs or whatever the dreaded nebulous term of an RPG can probably have some ideas that could be adapted, but it will definitely take more. Um, Oftentimes, it takes more of a filter, like a heavier filtering process or a longer filtering process. The other thing I didn't do for the Origel, let's give it a predecessor. There you go. That's a pretty reasonable unit, I think. It moves slower, hits much harder, has the piercing thing, and has the cloaking thing. It's pretty cool. Thematic, even though it's only tier 3. We'll see how far we can push that shit. What I am noticing is that this stream so far was a lot more about like documenting miscellaneous mechanics and stuff, and refamiliarizing myself with the Embra Cyt. I kind of underestimated how long it would potentially take me to dive back in to operating in the space of the Regency. But I guess most of that was probably due to just me not being very on task, which is fine. I wonder what other stuff we could pull from other regencies. We don't have any Psychorid mercenaries, and I don't think that we ever really will. Because when you think about it, like, why would they ever really be, you know, involved in that sense? Since they come from another reality altogether. So, don't know about that one. But it could be interesting to have some Githrovan stuff. I do remember one mercenary I was going to have, which was actually going to be a reprogrammed Rosellium unit of some kind. That could be pretty interesting, I think. The conceit behind the Deuteron is that even though it's like really tanky and actually deals quite a bit of damage, it'll probably move a bit slower considering it's passive, and it's quite cheap. Pretty funny. So, yeah, let's work that in here. Actually. Talk about an inside joke. So we don't yet have the structure for this. I don't think I fixed any crashes recently, so it has been being stress tested by some the Shark Templar guy who posted a little bit in the server a while back. He's been running like 2.5 hour long games on fastest maps, and he does get crashes somewhat often, but he just reloads when that happens. I guess he kind of skirts away through them. Still not ideal, but fucking nothing is these days, is it? So I think games below 30 minutes probably wouldn't be too big of a deal, but shit. I fucked it again. That's what I want. There you go. The Rogue Light. I gotta be a little proud of myself with those names sometimes. Even though it really is just a pun. I'm pretty sure I will find about 10 things when I search Arclight. Apple Maps says I'll find Arclight in multiple places near me. Plasma cutting tables. Well, I guess that is plasma related at least. Arc light can be made by using dark light on the altar of the center of the catacombs of Korend, with 3 ancient shards in the inventory. Yeah, arc light. Dang. Yeah, for all those wondering where Arclight Shock Cannon came from. Although the way that they were spelling it, I just assumed it was like a description. What if I just search Arclight? Arclight Lickvertrieb Gumb Luminaires and more. Optics. I don't know what luminaires are. What is this? Oh, they're actual lights. Okay. No, I had no idea. That's a pretty cool unit. I like that one. We haven't displayed the Totaran anywhere, but we can definitely throw them in at some point. Oh, okay. It's the inverse of what I did with Roguelite, then. I did have a pretty good meme idea earlier. Except it will actually be useful. I don't know if I can call it a meme. Makes me think of like agonist or agony, which maybe was the intention? Question mark. Perhaps. I do like when there's actual what would you call it? The fuck, why didn't I actually get the center tiles anywhere? Oh, here it is. But yeah, what was I gonna say? I like when you get your own ideas, basically, like your own names for stuff. It always sounds better in my mind than some shit that I've heard a million times before. Jesus, that's a mess. All right. I don't actually know if this will be sufficient. I guess probably not, but we'll give it a shot and I'll probably just clean it up after. I guess I don't actually know if that really worked. It's kind of funny though. I'm not really sure what I would play. I've already played Risk of Rain 2 to death, basically. I don't really know of any that aren't card games, unfortunately. Maybe there will be some that are recommendable. There you go, boys. The Uprise. It's a ramp. Now that's an icon. What a reality. Hit me with some suggestions in here or in Discord. I guess if you write it here, it's going to be in Discord later anyway, so that's fine. All right, I had to get that out of my system because I had that idea earlier, and I was like, oh shit, I should do that. Yeah, I tend to avoid those just because I think 2D side scrolling is pretty boring. But maybe I'm missing out on some valuable stuff. I don't even know if I've heard of Dead Cells. What's it like? I like how long programs take to launch these days. Pretty embarrassing. It's got a lot of DLC by the looks of it. Yeah, I'll need to wait for a longer sale for that one. uh, Interesting. I see. So it's kind of like enemies scaling with you kind of thing. Risk of Rain 2 had that problem as well, where they had these level up systems in their game instead of it just being like based on gear and base stats. Really weird. I think isometric top down, or well, I guess it's not top down if it's isometric, but you get the idea. Isometric over the shoulder, or third person are probably fine. I'm not really a big fan of side scrollers just because you get a really small amount of scale. I guess that's probably the calling card for them, though, is that they don't they actually don't mandate the same amount of attention or whatever. That sounds like it would be pretty cool, assuming it was a 3D FPS, but not sure. That would be interesting to take a look at. I haven't seen any of those before. Exposing infantry. That's funny. Oh, I don't think I give it a new icon. I mean, 2D RTS games can, or 2D FPS games can still be interesting. It's just a matter of like what goes into them, I guess. That's a prank. Quite the dearth of icons we've got going on here. I do like throwing out some alliteration for some of these. I don't remember if persistent is with an E or an A. It is with an E. That's probably one of the biggest like spelling gimmicks that fucks with me is whether it's A or E in an ent sound. Oh, it'd be nice if I move this over to 1, and I can give it the probably give it the amaranth icon or something. Oh, I guess I could give it the Legionnaire icon, since that's the one that has got its blades out. There you go. One thing we didn't account for with this relay thing is that it relays spam bot messages and then doesn't delete them afterwards. Would be a nice feature to add for them. Maybe it does, but the bot needs to manage messages permissions or something. But I'm not sure. Okay. Well, we threw in a couple of units here. Obviously, I guess technically we threw in 1 unit per branch. Would have been nicer if we it would have been nice if we had managed to get more done than this. But we did also document a bunch of stuff on the website. So we can say mechanics and Embra Cyt tech map for this. Pretty good shit. We'll call it there because it's been a little bit. Yeah, but that's not due to spam bots, Veek. That's like Nightbot or whatever. Basically, it doesn't relay messages from those. So that's the only. It doesn't show messages from those. That's what it's doing. It's not related to spam, I don't think. Anyway, I'm out of here. Gonna go take my walk, get some food, and then come back and probably do some more work on something completely different. Maybe I'll stream later today. If not, you'll catch me tomorrow with some game play, and that'll be it. So cheers, homies.